This is TV18 and you're watching CNBC TV18.
The last time an Indian film made it to competition for the prestigious Golden Palm at the Cannes Film Festival was 1994 with a little-known Malayalam film Swaham. Post that, films like Udaan and this year Dabba and Monsoon Shootout made it to competition, but in the section reserved for first-time directors. So just what is this hype about Indian cinema at Cannes? Dibakar Banerjee, one of India's most acclaimed directors, who was at the 66th Cannes Festival with his collaborative film Bombay Talkies, is on the A-list today, and he lets loose to tell you why Cannes and Hindi cinema are mutually irrelevant. Dibakar, thanks so much for being on the A-list.
Thank you.
Dibakar, Cannes has somewhere in the last 10 years or the last 5 or 6 years become extremely important in the scheme of things for the Hindi film industry. Why is it so important, and shouldn't we have more, and is it important to have more films competing in the competitive section as opposed to market screenings or who's wearing what on the red carpet?
There are two parts to your question.
Okay.
The first part is that Cannes has become more important.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, a large part of it was hoopla. A large part of it was also publicity for India, that we are there in Cannes. And a small part of it was innocent and misguided enthusiasm. Okay? Where a lot of us went there thinking that since we are Bollywood and since afternoon TV slots have us playing with housewives watching us, and pre-teens learning our dance steps in some schools, maybe we have become the in thing there, and maybe we are being taken seriously, but we are not. We are kind of a freak show. We're kind of a latest circus tent, curiosity. Consider it as an interest of the mainstream Indian audience in some kind of a tamasha from some rural fair, where it becomes a flavor of the year or something like that. That was one part of it. The second part of it is that the films that used to feature in competitions, some of them were very good. Some of them were so distant from the general movie-going public that no real judgment on them can be given right now as to whether they were good or bad or what they were. Okay. A certain kind of cinema in Europe is hugely elite driven.
Okay.
Cinema in Europe has replaced art over the last 50 years as the domain of the cultural elite to opine, dissect, analyze and eke a living out of. Okay. So what happens is that you must understand that festivals started in Europe to celebrate the limits of art and how far that envelope could be pushed. And entertaining the masses was genuinely not a concern, in fact a complete antithesis to the ethos of those festivals.
Yeah.
In a country like India, where cinema is designed to make you escape from a genuinely screwed up life, and it involves all of us, we can never have the same definition of cinema. So we will never have that kind of presence.
And is that okay?
That's us.
Yeah.
It's not okay or it's not good or it's not bad. I'm not saying that cinema and cinephile festivals in Europe who only celebrate cinema as pure art, completely away from entertainment, is good or bad. It's just the way it is. It's just their history. Our history is something else. Now, Indian cinema, first of all, has to make up its mind whether it wants to be this or that. You can't be both. Therefore, our producers and distributors sometimes get confused. They think they have made some film which does very well in India, which is called artistic in India, and then they go there and try and plug it, and they look like fools because that is very basic and rudimentary for that kind of a cinephile audience. So you need to know what you're competing against, and you need to know whether you have a setup here or whether you have a system here which endorses filmmaking, which is purely for artistic envelope pushing rather than commercial gains or entertainment.
But as a filmmaker, where would you place your films, and how important is the
I
entertainment
would
function?
definitely not place my film in Cannes.
Okay, so that's
Because
why.
it doesn't matter to me. Cannes, starting from a cinephile festival, has become a very, very entrenched and a very important market to sell films of all kinds, including porn.
Okay.
Of course, if you go to Cannes, there is a huge distribution network for legal pornographic cinema or semi-pornographic cinema or erotic cinema. So it's a film market along with a film festival. And films that go from here need to be very clear. Are they going for the festival or are they going for the market? Frequently, we confuse the two. If you are there for a market screening, तो market करके आओ, वहाँ बैठ के वाइन मत पियो और रेड कारपेट पे paparazzi फोटोग्राफ लेके मैं कान में हूँ ये मत बताओ. Okay, that's one thing. If you're there for a festival, then go and meet all the festival directors, see all the films as a producer, find out. And producers like Guneet Moga, Anurag Kashyap and other such people are doing precisely that. That is the correct beginning, rather than either creating a hoopla or breastbeating about why are we there in Cannes or why are we not there in Cannes. If people don't see Shanghai in my own country and get disturbed by it, there is no point in my disturbing a 45-year-old Scandinavian who earns my national GDP.
A couple of weeks back, Meera Nair was on the show, and she's made a couple of breakthroughs with her.
Of course.
With her kind of films, you know, and she felt, that there is really no need to actively go and seek a global audience or global recognition, because we have a certain rigor and we have a local market which laps up these movies. Yeah. So,
I would say that it's like this. I know that if I make films like Love, Sex or Dhoka or Shanghai, I'm surviving on a thin edge. Anurag has very candidly confessed that if his first film had been released on time, he would never have gone and sought out markets abroad to get his films into. It's destiny. Meera's first film was co-produced by an international co-producer. When the provenance of the film is not Indian, it opens up certain non-Indian doors. Okay? If you want to really get into that and say that whether the global audience is, you want that global audience, of course I want that global audience. But not at the cost of losing relevance in my own society. If people don't see Shanghai in my own country and get disturbed by it, there is no point in my disturbing a 45-year-old Scandinavian who earns my national GDP, you know.
yeah.
So there is no, so I have to be relevant here, and then I go there and I get my this thing, fine. For our insight to be featured in a competition where their artistic judges sit and judge and opine whether our insight is over their insight, it has to be hugely universal. Or it has to give them the excuse of looking at us like these little colonial beetles, how lovely they are. They too have intelligence, they too have art, they too have culture. Doesn't matter if they are mired knee deep in fecal matter, there is some beauty in that dirt. These kind of films sometimes break through, but otherwise difficult.
But as a filmmaker who's working in the present day Hindi film industry, there is no one unified audience too. You have your single screens, you have your smaller centers, you have your multiplex audience. A few years back, for instance, when Bhojpuri kind of took over and became this big boom, was because somewhere Hindi movies had stopped catering to the Hindi heartland. Right now, your movies perhaps, okay, they may go out to a few urban pockets, you know. So isn't that frustrating? Don't you want to connect to the widest possible numbers?
See, I mean, there's a very homey truism to sort of counter that. What it is that if you want to be everything to everyone, then you will end up being nothing.
Okay.
You know, and the number of friends that you have is inversely proportional to the depth of the relationship that you have with your friends. So I think, I know what I'm saying is very elitist. Suddenly, if I try and make a film that means everything to every Indian, I will never mean anything, except the most banal truth, which is nothing itself. So I unfortunately or fortunately am an urban Indian guy with a kind of an elitistic education and dwelling between elitistic people, but I can see beyond my own class and I can have some observations, but those observations will be most probably for Indian urban elite. I still haven't found a clue on how to say what I have to say about Love, Sex or Dhoka, which means everything that I want to say to a large mass of Indians, because I know that my own family has rejected Love, Sex or Dhoka as a film. They shy away from it. And I know that whatever I have to say, a large amount of India will shy away from it, or will be troubled by it, or will be provoked by it. But I can't change what I have to say. So within that, I have to survive, and that means I have to work within a certain budget.
Absolutely.
And go through a certain amount of tweaking of my storytelling and all that. And believe me, this is the oldest problem that the filmmaker has had ever since cinema was created.
Coming back to mainline Hindi films, because of this need to maybe be everything to everyone, there's been a sort of return to the 80s, which has sort of been the worst era, though I liked a few of the movies there. So everything's become over the top. You have heroes who want to be larger than life, like, let me go, I had Ajay Devgan on the show and he's a fine actor, but he said that, you know, I want to do these larger than life roles now because this is what finally gets me my widest audience. So you're seeing that happening in this industry that you're part of.
I'll go on the record to say that this vilification of the 80s is a media created, elite created thing to talk about, so that you have something to talk about. It has no meaning, it has no basis in fact. There were as many crappy films made in the 70s as in the 80s. If you go and see some of the crappy films of the 60s, you'll have the same feeling. There were as many crappy films made in the 90s, and there are as many crappy films being made today. There is nothing special. In the 80s that we vilify, vilify, gave us Ardhasatya,
Yes.
gave us Basoon, gave us Tezab, gave us Mr. India, gave us Kaljug, gave us Junoon, gave us Parinda, and I can give you a gem or two for every year, commercial and parallel or artistic or midway for every year. Chashme Baddoor, Jaane Bhi Do Yaro. Okay, so let's not even talk about 80s being, you know, something which
The
was
worst
very,
era,
yeah.
whatever, yes.
And even if you go commercially, there were films like Karma was 80s, right?
Yes. Coolie also.
Yeah.
And Mard, no, Mard Ya Mard too.
Huh. I mean, Mard, I would specifically put in that part of the 80s which we love to
Yeah.
hate and like, and at the same time. So forget it, that doesn't exist. It exists in the mind of elitist filmmakers who like to look down upon something so that they can spoof it and have the comfort of spoofing it to hide their mistakes.
Okay.
This was not serious. I was just sending something up. I was just spoofing it. So if it has flaws, these are not my flaws.
These are the flaws.
These
from
are
that.
those flaws. So that's nonsense. Coming back to the next question, that heroes want to act larger than life now. When did stars not want to act larger than life? From the 70s onwards?
Okay, maybe in the 90s they became more
Who,
about
wh-
being, no, not larger than life in the sense that, you know, beating up 20 guys and all. They were still larger than life because you were catering maybe to the NRIs and the diaspora, so then you had, you know, Shah Rukh doing a lot of things and stuff. But what I'm saying is that maybe it's led to an oversimplification. You know, they are your heroines.
You don't think
are,
90s oversimplified?
I don't know, I grew up watching.
What is about, Karan is a friend and he will endorse this. What is it about, I don't know whether it's a 2000 or 90s, what is it about, it's all about loving your parents, that
Kabhi
is not
Khushi Kabhi Gham.
oversimplified?
19, it was 2001.
Whatever, okay. And Karan's a friend and he will endorse it. Don't you think every era will have its oversimplification, because the wider you want to go, the more simplified you have to go. Take Hollywood's biggest blockbusters. They are paper thin.
Yeah.
They are paper thin in their what they have to say. They are paper thin in how they say it, including some of the biggest franchise characters, right?
Yes. I just saw Iron Man 3, so yes.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to name any, so because, but
it's
whatever
fine.
it is, and it's supposed to be a biggest numbers or biggest whatever. So that's what happens.
So basically, as a mainstream audience, you don't want complexity.
Obviously, and not only mainstream audience. I think what binds a person watching Iron Man in Bhojpuri in Bihar and the 240 kilo guy in somewhere in Ohio or Dakota, you know, is the same thing, that they've just come there with a packet of chips. They want to see action, they want to see something, and they want to escape the drudgery of their life. They want to see something larger than life, and they want to see it, and that's it. And that's the fundamental core mass promise of cinema, that we will give you life larger than life. And if that promise did not exist, so much money would not be given for ticket sales. And filmmakers like us who are opining right now and taking more time than you have, we did not have any money to make our films, because we survive because they survive. Over the last 20 years of consumerism, without any balance, if everything is supported by people who want to sell something, you will have some amount of dumbing down, which is not the fault of the filmmaker, but which is the fault of the overall atmosphere. I have never answered well to any promise. And I've always failed people. I've always failed people in some way or the other.
Dibakar, what are you moving on to next? Everyone knows about the 3-film deal with YRF, and everybody is concerned about the deal with the mainline production house.
You know, I don't remember Khosla Ka Ghosla being released by Dark Horse Films.
It's UTV.
From underground. Nor do I remember Oi Lucky. I don't remember Love, Sex or Dhoka being released by NGO Films Private Limited. And Shanghai was released by the only producer in the country who also owns a cinema chain.
Yeah.
Okay, only bona fide. So I have always teamed up with mainline producers, because that's the only way. In India, where we are hybrid. It's a hybrid this thing, and a very individual indie auteuristic visions like mine are actually financed by studios. So there is no. The reason YRF and DBP, my company, we are partnering together is because there is a fundamental synergy in what we do. That is, YRF loves making films and DBP loves making films. It's just that the size and the magnitude are totally different. Now, what YRF wants to do is, it wants to co-produce certain brands. And I'm not the only one, there will be others.
Yeah.
I'm just the first one. Certain ways which are markedly different from the previous perceived understanding of what YRF films should be. So this, I think, is the best reason. YRF wants to diversify, and I want to work on a 2 to 3 film deal. Of not all of them I'm directing. The first one is being directed by Kanu, Kanu Bell, who wrote Love, Sex or Dhoka. So that I can plan and I can do exactly what I want as a producer and as a director, with a 3-year long horizon in front of me. And believe me, I'm doing that. As I'm producing Kanu's film, I'm doing certain things towards producing my film while I'm doing a creative thing on that. And that kind of long-term planning gives me a certain amount of kicks. And that's, I think, overall is better for my growth as a filmmaker, both as a producer and director. Because in India, if I have to do my kind of films, I'll have to produce.
Yeah.
So that's what has to happen.
When a filmmaker gets as much adulation as you've got, and you know, as many rave reviews as you've got, and the other things which have happened for you, does that weigh you down with the expectation of having to see something in your films?
No. That's because I'm used to belying expectations. Okay. I used to be a good student in school who scored miserably in his higher studies in 11th and 12th, and I completely failed everybody. Then I got into an institute which was based on entrance examinations, and I did well and all that. Then I went there and I was chucked out. Okay. Then I came back home, then I started working on ad films, and I left ad films to start feature films, and now I'm sort of, doing ad films and feature films both. So I have never answered well to any promise. And I've always failed people. I've always failed people in some way or the other, in terms of expectations out of my career or job or whatever it is. So whatever comes as a bonus. Secondly, I have enough new grouses every year to kind of spill out for me not to kind of have to rest on my past laurels. So there's enough in this country happening which gets my goat every night, robs my sleep, and that way there's enough to provoke and there's enough to protest about in the coming years. So I'm sure that I will continue sort of, failing every expectation. And I think, see what happened, Khosla Ka Khosla, after Khosla Ka Khosla, nobody remembers how shocking Oi Lucky was. Today Khosla and Lucky are spoken of in the same breath. It wasn't so. When Oi Lucky came out, somebody called me up and said, "You made a shady film." So that was one aspect of it. After Lucky, because after Khosla, remember, they were talking about me as a Rishikeshian filmmaker.
Yes. Which is not a bad thing at all.
Well, for me it is. I would rather be me. So, and if you see Oi Lucky, then you know that why I would not like to be Rishikeshian. After I did Love, Sex or Dhokha, everybody gave up on me because a drunk fan in Delhi who loves my earlier two films, which he clubs them together, he told me, "Sir, aapke Love, Sex or Dhokha mein na love hai, na sex hai, bas dhokha hai." Okay? Shanghai completely sort of, belied all promises and completely turned out to be its own spastic animal, which scared and provoked everybody. And Bombay Talkies, nobody expected. I don't think anyone expected me to do Bombay Talkies like this. So I'm very happy and I'm very free, and my only promise is that I will fail always. So that way there is no problem. Plus I don't have television, I don't read any of my reviews, good, bad or ugly, and I have an insulated personal life. So that does a lot to sort of, to protect you.
So Dibakar, on that promise, rather radical promise of always failing all your expectations, thank you so much for being on the A-list.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.